If you know, you know.
It's TCA in stereo.
From the city to the lake, we make a noise.
It's TCA summer sessions. It's TCA summer sessions. It's TCA summer sessions. Let's go. It's TCA summer sessions. It's TCA summer sessions. It's TCA summer sessions. Let's go. Let's go.
TCA Summer Sessions, indeed. We roll on here in the TCA Studio in beautiful Bytown, Canada. Matt Robinson with you, as always. A new voice for you on the show today as we, as I said, these TCA Summer Sessions. We're doing the deep dive with a bunch of people from around town. Lisa Wallace is here. How's it going?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Really glad we were able to make this happen. It turns out I thought it might be a good week for it because the Red Blacks were on bye week, but you yourself are on a bit of a bye week.
Exactly.
So.
I'm on vacation, so it's a perfect day for an afternoon pint.
I like that. That has also worked out very well. Although vacation or not, it never really stops us around here. But we got to live the gimmick, right?
Exactly.
We're on social media at Tall Can Audio. Give us a follow there, and make sure you're subscribed to the podcast wherever you're hearing us right now, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you are. There's a follow button, a subscribe button. Go ahead and hit that, and with the usual nonsense out of the way, we get to the beers. What have you chosen there out of the TCA fridge?
I decided to go with a Canuck Pale Ale this afternoon. I like my light beer, I'll be honest.
Okay. That one's a personal favorite of Michaela Schreider, and comes highly recommended by her.
I'll have to let her know if it was a good choice.
Okay, yeah, for sure. She's all about that one. I'm going to stick with one. I won't get into it too much here because I've been having it a lot lately. We recently did a collaboration with the Nita Beer Company on our own Tall Can Audio beer. It's called Beautiful Bytown, a black IPA. That's what I'm going to ride with here today. And you and I were talking sort of a week or two ago when we were planning this out, and I sort of said it doesn't bug me at all when someone wants to come in and have a light beer. It leaves the dark ones for me, right?
And that is not my wheelhouse whatsoever. So you can enjoy that fully.
I will. There's no doubt about that. Look, there's a few different things I want to ask you about a little later on in the show. And actually, just today, as you and I are sitting here and talking about it, the Ottawa Charge made a little bit of news. I want to pick your brain on the Red Blacks a little bit. But first, we always make first-timers kind of take us through their journey, right? Their path. Some people are cool with it. Some people get a little squeamish talking about themselves. But, tell us a little bit about your journey, where you went to school. You were kind of telling me we call it the green room. It really just means before we've turned the microphones on. How do you find yourself where you are right now? Take us through your education and other gigs and whatever else. Yeah.
So I born and raised in Ottawa, and had always thought as I left high school that the plan was to maybe be an English teacher. Always had a passion for writing, and had played basketball through sort of my youth and through high school. And I did my first year at U Ottawa, and a friend of mine worked at Rogers at the time, and they used to cover, or they still do, I think, university basketball, and they were looking for a color commentator for Rogers. At the time, it was McLean Hunter, and he reached out and he's like, "Are you interested?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I can give it a whirl," kind of thing, and I did. And really, really enjoyed it, and wasn't enjoying so much my time at U Ottawa, to be honest. And so then from that experience,
I thought, what were you studying at U Ottawa?
I was just studying just a Bachelor of Arts kind of thing. And so then I thought, you know what, maybe I should transfer to Carleton and get into journalism. And so when I went to do that transfer, I actually did all my education, elementary and high school, at full French high school.
Oh, okay.
So I had taken some of my first year university classes still in French. And Carleton wouldn't recognize some of those credits. And I was like, okay, first year psych, doesn't matter what language, you should recognize it. But they were like, we'll take you into mass communications and not journalism. And I was like, okay, fine, same.
Sure,
and so
close enough.
I made the transfer to Carleton, continued working or volunteering at McLean Hunter, and did continue to cover basketball. I, at the time was CIS basketball, not U Sports.
Right.
And it was great. Really loved it. And actually crossed paths, got to know Richard Prevache, who is still doing stuff with the Blackjacks right now.
Sure.
And then he and I actually hosted a high school sports show on McLean Hunter. And then from Carleton, I went to Algonquin for journalism.
So you've done the whole thing. Like my sister did criminology at Carleton and then went to law school at Ottawa U.
Yeah.
And so she's not a big sports person, but she found herself torn at a lot of like the Panda games, and she knows the chants from both sides and the you know, what the F's a GG and like all these sorts of things.
My heart lies with Carleton.
Okay.
I will definitely say there's no no second guessing. It's I'm a Raven.
Right, all right, fair enough.
And then at the Thunder at Algonquin.
Sure.
And I have to say, it is at Algonquin that I really found I thrived. And, you know, you got to write for the newspaper there. And
So I interrupted you. What program did you end up in at Algonquin?
Print journalism.
Okay.
I had thought about going into TV because of doing the McLean Hunter stuff. But found it was too much on the technical side. I knew I didn't want to, you know, be a camera person
Right.
or producer, that kind of thing. So I thought I'm going to go in to journalism, and it was partially at the same time I had gotten a job at the Ottawa Citizen in their circulation department, and then got a job in the newsroom, just kind of answering the phones, and got to know a lot of their reporters. And it was them who were like, you need to go to the Algonquin program. That's where you're going to learn how to write. And so I did, and I had wanted to write sports. I knew that was kind of where I wanted to go. And at the time, the sports editor was not a big fan of believing women should be covering sports.
Okay.
And so I call it my break was the year that the Sens hired Jacques Martin. I was working just the regular kind of general desk, and they wanted to talk to his mother to do a story, and none of the reporters spoke French, but Ken Warren, who actually just recently retired from the Citizen, was like, hey, that girl on the desk, she speaks French and she likes sports. So they asked me if I could reach out to Jacques' mom, and so I wrote that story, and that was kind of my first break at the Citizen. And then from that point on, I became a full-time freelancer covering sports at the Citizen. And I have to say, I loved it. I covered high school sports, community, amateur, and then kind of really got a niche in with junior hockey, covering the 67s and at the time, the Hull Olympiques.
Right.
And just, you know, loved the stories, loved the people I was crossing paths with. Then made a switch to the Ottawa Sun because they offered me a full-time gig. And then it was at the Sun that I started covering the NHL. And it was, you know, having covered junior for
What year roughly are we talking at this point then?
That's going to be about 98.
Okay.
So yeah, we're going back a few years. That's when, you know, journalism was still in its heyday.
Yeah, of course.
And the Sun and the Citizen had, you know, quite the competition going. And so it was kind of seen I was crossing into enemy territory. But it was great. Having covered junior as long as I did, a lot of the players had made the jump to the NHL, similar timeline that I had. So like Yuri Fisher, Michael Ryder, you know, Brian Campbell. So
some of these names, yeah.
Yeah,
wow.
right? So it was great for me because it was still very uncommon to have women covering the NHL. I can remember, I was still at the Citizen at this time. The first time I showed up at the Senators to do a story, and it was going to be with Alexander Degg. Their PR guy was like, oh, no, you can't go into the locker room. And I was like, what? All the other reporters are, you know, strolling in. And he's like, no, you have to wait at the door, and I'll get who you need. And I kind of went, oh. And I didn't know any different, right? I was 23 years old. And I remember Wayne Scanlon came back out, and he's like, what are you still doing here? I'm like, oh, I wasn't allowed in the locker room. And he's like, the heck? Like, that doesn't make sense. And it happened for a few times, and I would miss guys because they would either
they'd be out the back door.
They'd leave the back door, and then you know, their PR guy would be like, sorry, he's gone, and then I'd have to explain to my editor, like,
Why
Sorry,
I didn't
couldn't
get the
happen.
interview I was supposed to, yeah.
And then thankfully the Sens changed PR staff, and I was welcomed into the locker room. But even then, like, Senators players were good. They, I didn't take a lot of heat from them, but visiting locker rooms, they were challenging. And it is thanks to people like, I say, Wayne Scanlon and Roy McGregor, who really kind of stood up for me and wouldn't allow people to kind of degrade me or
Sure.
that kind of thing. I can remember being in a scrum with Ken Hitchcock, and I asked a question, and he didn't like it. He's like, "Who the hell are you to ask me that?" And Roy McGregor just goes, "She's a reporter asking you a legit question
Right.
that you need to answer."
Good
and I was
on
like,
him, yeah.
"Oh."
Yeah. Somebody's got my back here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was good. But like, there were times I can remember I covered Lynx baseball for a number of years, and that was a nightmare as a woman. Like, it got to the point I literally called the league and I said, if you don't establish a sexual harassment policy, I'll be launching a lawsuit against you. Because
So what was different about that? Was it just because they felt they were not under the same spotlight, they could get away with mistreating reporters? Or
I think it was also just culture of the players that
Okay.
I was dealing with, right? Like, to them, they just saw kind of a young girl coming in, and for the way the Lynx, specifically the visitor dressing room, you had to literally walk through the shower area to get to the
Okay.
manager's office.
Right.
And just the
curiously
cat
designed
calls
locker room.
and,
Yeah, of course.
It was awful. And yet, even the Lynx manager at one point, I can remember, and this goes back, it was Team USA's women's soccer team had won the World Cup, and Brandy Chastain had kind of slid across the turf and kind of pulled off her jersey.
yeah, and the sports bra was
sports bra, right?
The earth-shattering moment.
Yes. And so the Lynx had just won a big homestand. And so I go down with my, at the time, son colleague, and the manager is like, "Oh, that was exciting. Like, that was so great." He's like, "Lisa, you should have run out on the field and ripped off your top like Brand." And I was like, "Are you serious? Did you literally just say that to me?" And it was my colleague at the Sun. He's like, "Jeff, you can't talk to her that way. Like, that's not appropriate,"
Yeah.
right? But this was the kind of stuff that I just put up with on a daily basis back then. So it's like, I always joked with my friends that I should have probably been a doctor because I saw a lot more naked men than most doctors do. So
Yeah, I'm curious, and look, we'll circle back. And I said to you before you came in here, it's kind of loose the route we're going to take here. And I did want to get to this point, and we're here now. So we'll circle back to the journalism side of it, and this is still related to it. You know, a year or so ago, we had Patricia Bowl in here, who was sort of around the same time frame as what you're talking about, doing the same thing at the Score down in Toronto,
Yeah.
and I'm sort of curious, to what degree would you say over, the next 20 years or so that it's gotten better? I know we're not perfect. I know we're not close to perfect, but is it significantly better? Is it a little better? Like, how long does it take before you stop, and if you haven't stopped feeling it, like that there is some sort of divide there?
I would say it's significantly better. I would say it's partially like players are more aware of it now. I can remember when, the Ottawa REDBLACKS were coming back to Ottawa,
Yeah.
and I was at Rick Campbell's press conference as being hired as head coach, and he and I were just chatting, and we were talking. About a little bit about Ottawa's football history, and I was telling him about my time at the Renegades, which that was really challenging. And he was like, "If you get any kind of shit from any one of my players, you got to tell me. I'm not putting up with that. That's not my locker room. That's not my culture.
Right.
It's unacceptable."
Yep.
So which I really appreciated. And I'll say Trevor Harris was also someone. One day we were just talking, and I'd finished with him, and I wanted to go talk to someone on the defense, which they're at the opposite side of the locker room. And so I just said to him, I'm like, "Hey, how's the nudity situation right now? I need to cross the room." And he's like, "What?" And I said, "I walk with my head looking down at the carpet. I know where I'm going, but I just want to make sure." And he's like, "Oh, never thought of that." He's like, "That's got to be pretty weird." I'm like, "Yeah, it's not the most enjoyable situation. Like, I'm not here, for a peep show."
Sure.
And from that point on, he was like, as a QB, as kind of, voice of that room, you need to tell me. Like, if there's something that makes you uncomfortable,
Right.
we're going to address it. So I really appreciated that. And
Sure.
I think, the NHL is much easier. Players, there's like the front room and the back room. So front room is they just get down to, underwear,
Yeah.
if you will. So it's never an issue. On the road, it was. I can remember back in the early 2000s when I traveled, it was often just one big open room.
Right.
And so,
Some of these older buildings and
right?
Yeah.
So I would know from morning skate, I would go, okay, like there's Wade Redden, that's where Alfie, Phillips, and I'd have my vantage point. So then post game, when I know everyone's in a rush because they got a shower, get back on the plane, I would pick my first guy. And at the end of every time I was done interviewing them, I need to talk to such and such. Is he dressed?
Right.
And they do the look. Yeah, you're good, right? but I knew that team.
Yeah.
I'd been around for a long time, and I think there was respect that.
Sure,
had been,
they know you're a professional. and-
exactly,
yeah.
right? So it was never so much Ottawa teams in particular. It was more visiting teams, and even I'll say it wasn't even just players. There were managers
Sure.
who I can remember. One was francophone, didn't know I spoke French,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just kind of had finished talking to one of the players, and he's like, I don't know if she knows anything about sports, but she's got great legs. And I just looked at him and I responded in French, and I was like, oh, thanks. But yeah, I actually do know a little bit about sports. And the look on his
Yeah.
face
Whoops.
was like,
Busted.
yeah. So
Yeah, when it comes to that, like even leaving aside there was just I can't remember who it was now. It's escaping me. Maybe you'll remember. You may have been there, but just last season, Claire Hanna was asking a question. I can't remember if it was to Travis Green or Steve Stais or maybe even Michael Landlauer, and just in the nature of a scrum. Like it wasn't anyone, I don't think, intentionally being disrespectful to her, but she got cut off in the middle of her question, and whoever was being interviewed said, no, wait, and came back to, like, even outside of the being uncomfortable in a locker room, do you find the respect amongst colleagues and amongst the people you're working with has increased, over those 25 years?
yeah, and I know exactly. That was Lena. We were talking to Lena Solmark.
That's right,
and,
yes.
And it was literally like that wasn't done on purpose.
No,
by any
it's just the
means.
nature
Like,
of being
it's
in a
just
scrum.
sometimes, right? You think someone's done,
Yes.
and it gets answered, and so you jump in because players only going to stand there
Sure.
for a certain amount of time. I would say the Ottawa contingency of media has always been extremely respectful, whether it's myself, Patricia, Claire, whoever.
Yeah.
Right, we're a pretty small group.
Sure.
We all know each other really well. That if there was something, we would just kind of call each other out,
Yeah.
if you will. So that was kind of more just an unfortunate
Sure.
thing.
Yeah, no, and I'm not trying to put a spotlight on it. I just...
I would say in general, like reporters have always been, accepting of having females around them. And if anything, some of them would probably say it's helped. I always think the one thing people have said to me is you look at things differently than a guy. And I'll say for all the shit that I've had to deal with, I've also been very fortunate because as a woman, I've had players and coaches say, yeah, I'll do that story with Lisa because I know
It'll get told properly.
it's going to get told from that personal
Sure.
aspect. I remember when Corey Clouston got hired, very little was known about him or his background. And I just asked, I was like, hey, can I do a first person piece with you? And he was like, yeah. And so we went actually out to Rideau Carleton Raceway because there was a bit of a history with horses and his family.
Oh, yeah.
And we spent probably 2.5 hours chatting. And then I wrote the profile. And I remember afterwards a few players coming up to me and going, I had no idea that's who he was and that's his background. Like, good on you for getting that.
Yeah.
And I remember there were back in the early days when I was at the Sun, I had done profiles with Václav Prospol, and I went to his house. And I remember at first he was a little like, oh, what's this? Seems a little iffy. And then he ended up pulling out his wedding video and same, I spent, I think, again, probably a couple hours, got to know him and his wife really well. And it was those pieces that I loved doing and getting to know the human and not just the athlete.
Sure. Well, and there's so much to that, right? Like when you're standing there in the locker room, they are in work mode. And if you can get, like you said, to the raceway or into somebody's home or whatever and get them to open up a little, they will let their guard down, almost certainly a little more than, but it's all about earning that trust first before they ever welcome you into that part of their life.
Yeah,
So-
right. And I've always been, I feel sort of my ethic is it's what we do is a job, and it's not up to me to have my personal bias come into my writing, especially if it's just a straight up kind of news story. When
Sure.
I was writing columns, sure, you can put your personal opinion in a bit more, but I think players respected that they knew I was kind of a straight shooter, and it's still what I do to this day.
So when you end up, you talked off the top there a little bit about playing sports and how is your family, like, did you grow up in a sports house? We're watching hockey night, we're watching the CFL, we're watching whatever we're watching, or was that sort of something that came to you on your own through your friends? Or
No. My family was big time sport. Like, I remember my mom's a huge sports fan, and so she would always have, we had the Grey Cup parties at our place, Saturday nights. My parents entertained a fair amount, and it was like the special treat where my brother and I would get to, fall asleep in their bed, and I'd fall asleep watching Hockey Night in Canada on, and this really ages me, on a black and white TV. And I remember, Dick Irvin's voice was just classic. And when I finally got to meet him, I was like, oh my God, like, this is full circle. I've reached the pinnacle kind of thing. And for him, he was like, oh my God, you make me feel so old telling me you listened to me as a child and now you're in the business.
Sure.
But no, always like big sports fan family, which I think is probably what kind of led me to the path that I was, because I knew I didn't want to be a news reporter. And I mean, obviously when you're young and starting out, and I was at the Citizen, I had to do my weekends of general news and that kind of thing. And I remember, one day I got sent out because we'd had a call about, a dead body had shown up along the shores of the river, and they're like, oh, you got to go. And I was like, oh my God, no, I don't want to do this. And the police were like, okay, yeah, come on down. Here's what we've got. And then they identified. And back then, right, no social media.
Right.
So I get back to the newsroom, and they're like, oh, we need a picture. You need to go to the family's house. And that's when, back in those days, like, you're literally knocking on the door and
Of someone having the worst day of their life.
right.
Yeah.
And you're going, oh, I'm really sorry for your loss. Would you be able to share a picture with us? And you either got welcomed into the home and shown like family albums, or you got the door slammed in your face.
Sure.
And it was a 50-50 shot. You never knew what you were going to get.
Yeah, we had 2 weeks ago as part of the TCA summer sessions, Matt Scooby was here. We called it his Ottawa exit interview. But he was saying that he went off to university to be an athlete. Things didn't work out. He gets, sort of involved in doing sports media there, goes to the Toronto School of Sports Media or whatever it's called. I'm botching the name a little bit. And he's like, that's it. I'm going to be in sports media. And then he kind of goes home and he's doing some, weekend sports reporting and stuff on TV. And he gets a job all of a sudden here in Ottawa doing the news. He goes, he's never looked back. He goes, I'm every bit as big of a sports fan. He goes, all the people I talk to who cover sports sort of stopped being fans. Like, they still loved the job, but he goes, I was able to still be a fan of, I don't know how much he talked about it on CTV at the time, but he was a Leafs fan. God love him, as am I.
You didn't tell me that.
Yeah, well, if you didn't pick it up on your own walking into the studio, I don't tell people till they get here, right? And they look around. But it's interesting to see kind of the route people take to get where they are. He said he never saw himself doing news. He was going to be a sports guy.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, that's the way it sounds like you always knew, no, sports, that's what I'm doing. This is the lane I want to stay in. At what point do you realize, whether it be through, what you're doing in school or your first couple of gigs there and jumping between the two evil empires here in town at the time, that this is going to work out? I can make it in this field.
I was pretty lucky. And I mean, let's face it, life was probably a little less expensive back in the 90s. When I started at the Citizen, and I never managed to get hired full-time at the Citizen, but I was a full-time freelancer. And I worked like a dog because you got paid per story.
Okay.
So, my weekends would be spent Saturday and Sunday covering, anything from maybe an amateur soccer tournament in the morning, maybe some tennis event in the afternoon and a Lynx game at night.
Wow.
So, but it was great because I learned how to cover and write about a lot of sports early on. Because as much as, I was definitely a hockey fan and a football fan growing up, but I had never really, I didn't know how to write about tennis.
This is what I was just going to ask you, is when you say you're a sports kid, I didn't get into it till kind of my teens, but it was hockey, baseball, and football, and that was it. And to this day, if you ask me about tennis or whatever, I'm like, I respect the hell out of them.
Yeah.
I get it, but I don't know anything about it. Like, you couldn't get me to sit down and sound educated on the subject.
And I can remember covering, I got sent to a curling event, and it was the year, I think it would have been 98. It was the first year curling was being added to the Nagano Olympics.
Yep.
And so this was an Olympic qualifier event in Ottawa. And I was like, oh my God, like, how am I supposed to cover this? And
They
thankfully,
swept very well.
my stepfather was a big curler.
Oh, okay.
So I'd asked him for some tips, and then I was, trying to read some stuff. But clearly, I must have come across as a bit of an amateur because Mike Harris, who ended up actually representing Canada at the Olympics, picked up on my very limited skill set and was like, okay, at the end of the night, you got to come back out and you're going to throw some rocks.
Okay,
We're going to explain to you how things work.
Sure.
Best thing ever, right? Like, and it was like curling is such a social event. Like, right, you have your beers, and so
Sometimes in game.
and so that was kind of how I learned about curling, was firsthand from this team who was willing to explain, because for them, right, they were trying to grow the sport,
Of course, get the word out
as well.
Yep.
So they were like, "Yep, we'll explain it to you, and we'll tell you what you should write and shouldn't write, and that kind of thing." So yeah, it was lots of fun.
So let me ask you kind of a two-parter here. Your favorite event you've ever covered, whether it be an individual game that just turned out kind of crazy or something you were sent to or whatever, and what would objectively be the biggest event or game you've ever covered?
Favorite. There's been a lot of favorites over the years. Man, like I was fortunate enough that, I covered the 67's run in 99 that got them to the Memorial Cup.
They hosted, right?
Yeah,
Hitmen and no, that's the right year. Calgary Hitmen were here. And
so Ottawa had been on a tear all year, and then they got, bounced in the first round of the playoffs by Belleville. And so they got the rest for 2 months almost before Mem Cup because they were host. So that same year, Hull was on a tremendous run. And so since Ottawa had been knocked out, I switched over to the Hull Olympiques.
Right.
And I covered their run through to the Quebec Major League Championship, where they faced Roberto Luongo, who was playing for Bathurst. And that was by far one of my favorite playoff runs. It was just Claude Julien was head coach in Hull. Michael Ryder was captain. Yuri Fisher was on that team. Like, there was just some really, really great players. And I can remember when they lost in Bathurst and the tears from those players, right? Of not having fulfilled their journey and knowing that Memorial Cup was being held in Ottawa.
Yep.
It was gut-wrenching to have to walk into that room. And that's where, I'd been with these guys for 2 months. I traveled on the bus with them everywhere. And it was really hard, but at the same time, it was like, I got a job to do.
Yep.
And, and I think because of the fact that they knew me a little bit, they understood what needed to be done, and I was able to get the story. But then, to switch and go cover the Memorial Cup and see Ottawa win after having sat for 2 months, right? Like, there were a lot of really Brian Campbell and Seamus Kotick and, Lance Galbraith, all those guys. Like, they just made covering that team a lot of fun.
That Memorial Cup is so strange to me, as quite frankly, and the good listener already knows this, I'm a pro wrestling nerd.
Ah, okay.
That's the night that Owen Hart died in his accident there.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that.
So Bret Hart at the time with Joe Sakic and a couple other people owned the Calgary Hitmen. And so he's in Ottawa, and he flies to Toronto, and then he's on a flight from Toronto to LA, and he's on that flight from Toronto to LA when someone comes back from the cockpit and says, you need to call home right now, right? And so, like, as a nerd, I know Brett's book and whatever else. But it's like this great story in Ottawa, right? That the 67s have done the thing, and yet that same night, it doesn't matter. It's just one of those funny associations you make in your own head, right? That it happened on the same night.
Yeah.
And
then
the biggest.
I mean, I'd probably have to say, Senator Stanley Cup run in 2007. And I was very, very pregnant at the time for my second child, my son. And so...
Too pregnant to fly to Anaheim, or are you still... Okay,
yes.
yeah. So it's only the home games.
And so I can remember, and actually, I think it was game 3 or 4. It was home game.
Yeah.
And I was going up in the service elevator, and it got stuck.
Oh, no.
And I just happened to be... Doc Chow was in there with me going up to the press box. And so there's a few other people, and he just looked at me.
So for those of us who's Doc Chow?
So he's the Senators. He was just the Senators' doctor who, took care of all the guys. Was their regular, traveled with the team and everything.
So if the worst were to happen in this elevator.
So that's what he looks at me, and he's like, I haven't delivered a baby in a really long time, but I could probably do it. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not happening.
Let's not do this here tonight.
Here. But I do remember, I big belly, and Wade Redden won. It was early in the playoffs. It wasn't during the Cup final, but it kind of bumped up against me, and he was like, "Whoa, wow, that's really." And then he was like, "Can I touch it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." He's like, "Wow, that's kind of cool." And then he ended up scoring in whatever series that was.
This is about to be a thing.
So it kind of, he'd see me, and he'd be like, and it would just be kind of like a quick little tap or whatever. But that was like that building during that run. It was like, it literally felt like the building was shaking.
Right.
And it was unbelievable. So I felt very fortunate to cover that. But yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest, the one sport I've never covered an NFL game, which I'd love to have that opportunity. And I haven't covered an Olympic Games, which at some point I'd love to be a part of, but been fortunate to cover, a lot of big sporting events in this city.
Well, based on my poor interviewing skills, we have missed the part where you jump to CP. When do you end up making that move, so what you're doing right now?
I made that move in about, I think it was 2000. I want to say, was it just after the Cup run?
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 2008. My son was really young. Mm-hmm. And so I've been with CP ever since, which is great because, the one nice thing about CP that's funny is I have friends who, live out in BC, and my in-laws are in New Brunswick.
Right.
And they'll be like, oh, I saw your story in, the Fredericton Gleaner. And I'm like, oh, right, because CP's reach, right, is just so wide-ranging.
CP is like the chief in this country. It makes me crazy because people will do the thing like, don't tell me the media is not bought and paid for.
Yeah.
And it's the same story in 3 different papers. Like, you don't understand how this works, do you?
Right? Like it's a wire service.
Right.
And anybody who has a subscription can kind of pay and,
and use this story.
And partially because the industry is shrinking, right? It's the only way to get that news out across the country. So I've been really fortunate, right? Right now I cover the NHL, I cover the PWHL and the CFL, and then kind of any other events that come across the city that are nationally based.
Right. In that 2007 run, I wasn't living here in the market yet. Obviously, as a Leaf guy, I grew up down in Oshawa. So I was a Generals guy too, not just so anti-67s, anti-Sens. Mm-hmm. I did get on board with the REDBLACKS and the PWHL because it neither required me to abandon previous allegiances, right?
Yes.
Like they were new teams, and I felt okay about doing that in my new hometown.
Yeah.
But in that 2007 run, Anaheim was a bit of a juggernaut. That top three with Niedermeyer, Boschman, and Pronger. The forwards they had, that checking line of Paulson with Robbie Niedermeyer and Travis Moan. I don't know why I remember those three guys specifically. But in the moment, Ottawa's also been building to this for a while. A lot of people will tell you that the 03 team was the best team and they ran into New Jersey. A lot of people will tell you that the 06 team where Hasek bails out, but otherwise was the best team, but a goaltender was thrust into a situation he wasn't ready for. Going into that 07 final, when you looked at the matchup, what was the mood here in the market? Did Ottawa feel like we got a shot at this, or did they know or feel like an underdog going in with the way that Anaheim team was built?
No, I mean, I think the mood here was that it was going to be a challenge.
Sure.
But
why not
that it was
us,
kind of like, why not us? This is our year, right? We've missed out on so many other chances where we should have won. And so I think they just thought if they played to their best ability, that they had a chance. And it is the one thing, right? It's cliche to say, but anything can happen in playoff hockey,
100%.
as we've seen. And so, I think it is one of those things where, I think the belief was here. I mean, if I remember correctly, I think most of the odds makers were saying things were in Anaheim's favor.
Sure.
But being in this market, right, you can't help. And I always say,
hell with that, right? We're going to do it.
Yeah. Going back, that as a reporter, you stop being a bit of a fan. I say I stopped being a fan of teams, but I'm still a fan of players.
Sure. Yeah.
Of individuals. And so for me, players like
I know these guys. I like these guys. I want them to do well for themselves.
Right? Like Alfie and I I came in covering the NHL Alfie's first year. So, and he and I are the same age.
Right.
So I always joke, we kind of grew up together. And so you rooted,
of course,
for them. Like you had lived the highs and you had survived the lows. And so you wanted to
You've been in the locker room when you can tell somebody's more banged up than the fans know or whatever, right? I hope this guy gets rewarded for what he's put into it.
So you hope for the best, but I really do hope for this city and for this franchise that at some point there is a Stanley Cup that gets raised here, because I think it is a great market and it deserves to see and get back to a cup final again. And I think right now it's getting close. I think there's still a few things that need to come into play.
But they're clearly in a better spot than they have been.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
This is the closest they've been to in years.
Yeah. For sure. Take me inside, your perspective on, I want to talk about the arrival of the REDBLACKS and the arrival of the Charge. Let's do them in chronological order. So the arrival of the REDBLACKS back in 2014, it had felt like they had been granted a conditional franchise for a long time. Yeah. Like it felt like it was taking longer than most people were suggesting initially for this to get up and running. But once it happens, it's immediately grasped onto. And I think, again, as an outsider, as someone who doesn't grow up here, I was listening to Bob McCown down in Toronto and Don Landry, who was a big CFL person, and they were both saying, under Jeff Hunt and the local management, this is going to be fine. Like, this is not the same. This isn't the Renegades.
Yes.
This isn't the dark days of the end of the Rough Riders. Under a group like this can succeed. And I think a lot of people from outside Ottawa were looking, going, I guess, right? Maybe. Let's see. Did you know that under this new ownership with the management they were putting together that this would be as successful immediately as it became?
I had really high hopes. I had been covering the 67s when Jeff Hunt came in as the owner, and he turned that franchise around, right? So he had shown that he had full support in this market. And yes, football's a little different, but
Ottawa football fans have been burned, right? Yeah.
And I can remember, being in high school, going to Rough Rider games with friends and loving it. It was always a great atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And back then, maybe I didn't care so much about the product. I was more there for the social atmosphere. But I did feel that with Jeff and the rest of that ownership group, you had people who were not only financially committed, but emotionally committed, which to me, I think says a lot.
And that the market trusted.
Yes.
Which was big, right?
Right.
Like,
and so I think they knew that things were under, good or in good hands. And then when you sign a guy like Henry Burris, who, had a reputation in the CFL, things were good. And then, second year you bring in guys like Brad Sinopoli and Greg Ellingson. You saw there was a legitimacy to this franchise.
And in that year, too, they're all the way to the Grey Cup final.
Right.
Like, tremendous success right away.
Exactly. And winning.
And it became fun. Like, the stadium, the job that they did on that in the early days is so crucial. And frankly, for the last couple of years, they've been hanging on to it, right? Like,
and that's the thing. It is the social atmosphere that has allowed them, I think, to continue to thrive, despite maybe not as great.
The performance on field hasn't been good enough, but it's still a fun place to go on a Friday. So you kind of get some people to hang in longer than maybe they would have.
Yeah, on a summer night, that is an unbelievable stadium.
It is.
To be in, and it doesn't matter where you sit. Like, I love those South Side stands.
Sure.
And I mean, I know people, they like the North because they're covered. And sure, when it's raining, it's great.
And it always is.
But, we had friends here from PEI for the June 29th game. And they were sitting pretty high up on the South, but it was a great view. And they're like, this is amazing. Like, you're so lucky to have this. And I think at the end of the day, you do have to realize we are very fortunate to have pro sports in this town. Because I remember as a child, yes, CFL was the only pro sport here.
Right.
NHL hockey was still just a pipe dream.
Yeah, you're a Habs fan or a Leafs fan.
Yeah. And so I hate sometimes when people say, "Oh, Ottawa fans are finicky," and it's like, yeah, sure they are, but Ottawa football fans have had it rough.
Yes, they have.
Like those Lonnie Gleiberman years were just a disaster. But
you mentioned it. Like, when I go down there, I probably watch the first half from my seats, and then I'm down kind of over on the bridge, or you're walking over to meet up with people in one of the bar areas or whatever, and you kind of keep an eye on the game, and it's just a cool place to be. And look, we've sort of had this debate on the show over the last couple of years that, like, that's running out of fuel as being a good enough reason to go, but it has allowed people to hang on a little longer while they try to figure this thing out on the field.
Yeah.
At least that's my take.
Yeah, I agree. And I have to say, I am a little surprised at their record this year. I definitely, when I was writing their preseason piece with the additions that they had made with like guys like Gino Lewis and stuff, I expected a lot more. And I'm not sure really what the problem is at this point. I mean, sure, Drew Brown, missing.
Sure.
I think those first, getting injured in the first game isn't ideal. But for whatever reason, it's like they're their own worst enemy in
That's
games.
the frustrating part, is it always feels like silly mistakes, bad penalties that just leave you kind of going crazy. And that leads sports fans, and at times, I'll be honest, myself included, to go, you know what? You've turned over a lot of this roster. You've changed the DC. You've changed the OC. The head coach is the only thing left. And it's a little irrational to say that he's the one responsible for that guy taking a silly penalty or whatever. But fans get there, right? Like, fans have been through some things. We talked about it. And at some point, that's the only thing public-facing left for fans, right?
And that's I can't remember what game it was, because my mom is still a big football fan. And, and they were losing, and she's texting me. She's like, "Oh, they need to do something with that head coach." And I'm like, "Okay, let's hold off here." I'm like, the head coach is not on the field and taking an unnecessary roughness penalty. Like, there are certain things that are out of his control. And yes, I'm sure he is going to ream into that player for that kind of behavior. But at the end of the day, it's just, it's a lot easier to fire a head coach than turn over.
At some point, you almost, to a fan base that's been this loyal, for lack of a better term, you have to throw somebody to the lions, right? And I do, sitting here at 1-6, coming out of the bye week, look, they're in trouble. And it was interesting to watch this weekend play out. and you kind of watch, okay, Toronto wins again and Hamilton wins again. And you're kind of like, this is worst case scenario. And yet, kind of like, well, those at some point almost aren't that, like, you're almost now more worried about keeping the crossover teams behind you. So I don't know what the best case, but I know it's a bad scene right now in Ottawa. And unless they start winning, none of it's going to matter.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I think, the turning point I look back was when Rick Campbell chose to leave the team and Marcel Desjardins stayed. I think to me that might be the one blip by ownership where it should have been the other way around. It should have been Marcel who kind
moved
of
on,
got the door and you keep Rick, because under Rick, that team, there was trust, there was belief, but Marcel was a bit of a GM who it was like his way or no way, and Rick kind of got tired of it. It is an interesting choice to me that Bob Dice brings Rick Campbell in.
And to Dice's credit, right?
Right.
Because you're hiring
potentially
your ready-made replacement, right? And if it doesn't go well, the guy is already here who can take over for you. So good on Dice for being willing to do what was best for the team in that moment. But I think a lot of fans are going, look, the guy is already here. We're fed up. Whether that's fair or not, and look, I've been unfair at times. I'm frustrated watching this team right now. I have no idea whether replacing Dice would help or not. But sometimes when you're in a public-facing organization like this, that's all that's left. Like, if the season is lost, and I don't know, the season's probably lost, but it's not totally lost. Like, if at the end of the year you're going to do this anyway, then maybe that is the sacrifice you throw to the Lions.
Right, and that's the thing. I think sometimes that choice is made more to kind of give your fan base something.
They did something.
Right, okay, all right. They're not just letting the season, be a wash. They're actually showing something. And so it's not even so much about a lack of belief in a head coach. It's just, we just need to do something for the public eye.
This is the move. This is the button we're pressing.
Yeah.
The other franchise that has made its way in here over the last few years and has been like an unmitigated success is the Ottawa Charge. And I was a little surprised, maybe I shouldn't have been, but when they named their original 6 franchises, I fully expected Montreal and Toronto and Boston and whatever. I will say I was a little surprised that Ottawa was a part of that. And yet, in hindsight, it was obviously the right decision. I think we've heard, I can't remember exactly who had the story, but that Gary Bettman was one of the people who suggested to the league when they were getting up and running, take a look at Ottawa. Like, I think this could work well for you. When you heard this league was starting, did you expect that Ottawa would be in that first batch of teams, or did that catch you a little off guard as well?
I wasn't totally surprised, right? I think it made sense just for the proximity of having Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, right?
Sure.
It creates a
we have this little northeast block.
Right, a little natural rivalry. Travel is fairly easy for Boston, New York. I mean, Minnesota to me was maybe kind of the outlier.
Yep.
So
not anymore.
No. So not totally surprised, but pleasantly surprised of the support that this team has gotten over the past couple seasons, and just amazing to see the diversity of fans who attend their games, because Ottawa Charge games are very, very different than Ottawa Senators games, right? Like it's seeing the little girls and the signs, and right, like you are giving an entirely new generation of female.
It's fun when you go.
Fans.
Like, it's loud because it's the old barn, but it's also loud because of the crowd you have in there, and it's a higher pitch roar when somebody scores, right?
Yeah.
I remember I got tickets for Christmas for my mom and my sister, and we were going to go to the home opener.
Nice.
And we just got in, like, we had pretty decent seats, but they would be like, I can't remember the exact, but it was like, there's 4,700 tickets available, and they sold out immediately. Like, I think we can get up to 5,500, and then it was like 6,200, and they kept peeling back this rarely used upper balcony and got to like 7,800 or whatever it was to finally sell the thing of, that's it, we're out of space. But it was crazy good to see how quickly this thing was adopted. But like, I'm walking in the door and they're putting the light up wristbands on you, and there's kids everywhere, and there's signs, and the players are going out of their way to, you know, if there's somebody with an Emily Clark jersey or sign, she's, you know, pointing and smiling and whatever else. Like, it was a crazy good vibe right off the hop, and it's great hockey also at a non-NHL price, right? Like, which makes it easy to take a family and have a good Sunday afternoon or whatever it's going to be.
Right, and I think that is the thing, is that it's an affordable product, and it's a solid product.
Yeah.
And good on the league to kind of differentiate themselves from the NHL with, you know, the jailbreak rule and kind of coming in to trying some new things to generate a little bit more scoring in the game. I will be honest, I was a little maybe not shocked, but surprised that they've already tried to have expansion.
Yep.
I think it's early. I'm not sure. I'm a little concerned
This
the
was
quality.
exactly where I wanted to go next.
I'm concerned the quality of the product is going to get watered down a bit, and I would hope that this is the end of expansion for at least, I would say, 3 years. I had always said when the league opened up and I saw, you know, the first year, and we had chatted, a few of us, I'm like, you shouldn't expand for 5 years. You need to build this brand. You need to prove the quality of the product and everything. And so to expand in year 3, I think is early. I'm not sure you have the depth of talent just yet. I mean, you are now pulling more from, you know, Europeans.
Sure, yeah.
So, okay. But even there, you can only go so deep before it's going to affect the overall product. And I've been told, right, like, yes, sure, we heard the numbers are up and everything, but they're losing money.
Okay.
And so as an owner, right, and it's only single ownership right now, I don't care how deep your pockets are, how much money do you want to lose over a number of years?
That single ownership structure is also frustrating people in the sense that, you know, Ottawa specifically has been, and this is one of those rare instances where I'm normally the Leaf guy who doesn't really care about the small market. Now I'm a Charge fan that's going, how does Darryl Watts just walk out the door and end up in Toronto where the national team coach and that? You're kind of raising an eyebrow at some things. And I don't know, when I look at the way the expansion process has played out, and I kind of, at first, I thought it was overly penalizing to the existing teams, but I had no idea, even with already having that opinion, how hard it was going to hit some team. And look, this is maybe where I'm just a biased fan, maybe no team got hit harder than Ottawa. Were you surprised when you saw the rules that they were going to allow their current teams to be carved this deep? And, you know, stepping forward from that, as I, you know, sort of where I took it, that Ottawa was devastated quite the way they were. Yeah.
I mean, I remember reading it and I thought, wow. And it was during the playoffs, right?
Yep.
It was just before game 1 of the league final.
I think that's right, yeah.
And so I was down at the rink with a couple other reporters when we read them, and I was like, this is going to be devastating to some
I think
teams.
it was 3 you could protect right off the hop, and then another after you'd lost 2.
Yes. Yeah. So we were all, you know, trying to hedge bets as to who are they going to protect, and we automatically, with the way Gwen Phillips was playing, right, that's a guaranteed one. Emily Clark was year 2, and then 3 was kind of up in the air. But it was then seeing the number of players who just chose to go sign elsewhere. Yeah. And that,
in that little free agent window that you could,
that I don't think any of us would have predicted. And so it's kind of disappointing for this team, because after, you know, you reach, you know, the league final, and I'm not sure what you're going to see next season on the ice. Like, it's, you know, especially you look at the draft, these 3 Russians?
Yep.
Right? Nobody knows
They've been creating the
anything.
Russian Women's League, but what does that translate to over here?
Yeah.
We don't know yet.
Right. So I think it'll be very interesting. I have a lot of respect for Mike Hirschfeld. I think he's done a good job, but yeah, like
I know
it's going to be interesting.
This
to
was
see.
hard because for Christmas, I got someone gave me an Ottawa Charge jersey.
Oh, nice.
I think it was the biggest size they have. Most of the women's fans don't need the. I'm like 6'3" and such pounds. We don't need to get into that. I'm a large man, but anyway, the jersey fit nice and there was no name on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, kind of kicking it around with my niece and a couple of friends who are into the league. Like, if you were going to put a name on it right now, what would it be? And in my mind, it was Danielle Serdachny, second overall pick. And yeah, she struggled in her first year, but this is a building block piece, right? Someone who's going to be here for the long term and clearly is going to be skilled. And at some point, will at worst be your second line center.
Yeah.
And thank God I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Like, she's out the door. They gave up on one. Like, there should have been some, in my opinion, some sort of thing like, anybody who's been drafted in the last 12 months is exempt from the 3 players you're protecting or something like this. It just felt like it cut really deep into the existing teams. And like Ottawa went on a bit of a run. You mentioned Gwynn Phillips and her role in that, but like New York couldn't afford to give up 3 players.
Yeah.
Like they were struggling as it was. This was harsh.
Yeah. I think it's looking back. I have heard chatter through the league that, you know, if there is additional expansion, the rules will definitely be different.
I would hope so.
That they've learned that this was maybe a little harsher than what they had anticipated. And so lesson learned. But that's great. Lessons learned. But there are going to be some teams this year who are going to struggle mightily out of the gate, I think.
So the show that you and I are doing right now is going to drop on Wednesday, but we're talking on Monday afternoon. And just this morning, we did see that Gwyneth Phillips has signed an extension to stay in Ottawa. Is there anything... I mean, she was fantastic, thrust into the spotlight, based on injury, right? I don't think they were banking, on her having to start as many games as she did, and then her being as great as she was. Yeah. Have you seen enough? Like, is there any part of you looking at that and going, it's kind of a small sample size to be hitching your whole wagon to it? And that decision also had to be made when they decided which goalie to protect or, let one leave or whatever they were going to do in that situation. Mashmeyer was great in the market. Like, I think people loved her. That was a tough decision. She's a little bit older and making a little more money. So it is what it is. But have you seen enough out of Gwyneth Phillips to say, yep, I'd hook my horse to that?
I will say yes. Yeah. And hopefully it doesn't come back to bite me later this season. But I think so. And when you look at her body of work in the NCAA as well, I think that speaks volumes. I had spoken to the Charge goalie coach, Pierre Grew, who I knew quite well from his time with the Senators. Right. And he says that, she is the legit deal. Okay. And so I have absolutely no qualms with her kind of carrying the workload for the Charge. I am curious. I don't know a lot about Logan. I'm going to say, is it Angers or Anders? I should know that.
Anders, right? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll clean it up and post if we're wrong. We're not live, so it's beauty, right?
That, should the, unfortunate happen and Gwen gets injured or something.
Yeah, things happen.
I don't know the depth there.
Yeah, they're going to have to lean on her a lot.
And right, which the same way they did with Mashmeyer in year one.
That's right.
Who played every single game. Otherwise, she wasn't supposed to start one game, and then I can't remember who the backup was for year one. Yeah. Got injured in the first period, and Mash came in. Yeah. And so she was able to carry that workload. And I think I look at Gwen, and I would assume she's going to want to do the same and carry that workload as much as possible.
Last thing for you, there was some talk here just a week or two ago during the MLB All-Star break that the Hockey News was saying whether or not, or wondering out loud whether or not it was time for the PWHL to bring in their own All-Star game. And I'm on record already here, having said I don't love the idea just because you already have a couple international breaks. You have I don't know how long it'll continue, but the rivalry tour. Yeah. World Championships ends every year almost in Canada versus USA in the ultimate all-star game. And And yet it is a symbol of legitimacy for a league to have an all-star game and another, weekend where you showcase to your sponsors, your top players. Do you have any thoughts on whether or not that's something the league should be looking at right now?
I'm not a huge fan of it. I think, like
we also
you said,
kind of hate all the all-star games that
Yes.
exist anyway.
Yeah,
we don't love any of them.
And that's exactly, so maybe I'm the wrong person to ask about this. But I do. And it is something, that I asked Jana Hefford at her press conference during the Cup final is there talk of eliminating all these numerous breaks during this season?
Kill your momentum
right?
over and over.
And so I know they are in talks with the IIHF of let's move World Championships to the end of the season, much the way, the NHL does it, so that you're not constantly breaking up your season.
Yeah.
And the rivalry series, really, do we still need that? Come on.
It was brilliant for what it was, but we have the league now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a useless break and unnecessary, that then all you're doing is leaving a bunch of players back home to practice and stuff. So
and the early one last season was the European A or whatever it was. I get some of these things are going to happen, but maybe we can limit them or fold them into one break or something.
I would rather see, this year how they had, oh my gosh, can't remember what they were calling, where they were visiting the different cities, right?
Oh, yeah, where the league itself took its teams to,
So let's say right now there's no team in Edmonton or something where you say, we're going to spend the weekend, and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all the teams are there.
Sure.
And we're just going to have a showcase weekend of the league. And that, to me, will do a lot more for your product than an all-star game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because, I can't, and it's bugging me. I can't remember what they called the tour either. But,
right?
Everyone knows what we're talking about. They played games in St. Louis and Washington and Edmonton and
Vancouver.
Yes, and Colorado, I think. So they were all over the place. And I understand the idea, but they were doing it at the same time. We were just coming off I think it was Boston, who played one home game in 7 weeks. You're like that, because you also had the Christmas break rolled into it. And you can't have it all.
Yeah.
And so I think if that tour is going to continue, the rivalry series is going to have to, they're going to have to find a way to scale this back or put these breaks, at the same time or something. And it's a tough thing to navigate. The IIHF, I'm sure, is we've had our worlds at the same time for a long time. Your league is the new thing. You figure it out. And then the league is but we have all the players, so you move your thing. And I'm sure it's not easy.
I would love to see because now you're going to have 4 Canadian teams, is your 4 Canadian teams maybe go out east to Halifax and play a set of games there over a weekend. And your 4 American teams go, I don't know, Washington, wherever, right?
And people think Pittsburgh wants a team that'd work, right?
And do a league showcase event. To me, that's going to bring a lot more than if you have a bit of an all-star game. And I just don't think you're quite at that point yet. You still need to sell this product to a much wider audience. And I think if you can get more eyes on it, is gonna just benefit you.
And again, from a fan's perspective over here, I think you need to kind of make up with your fans in these original 6 markets a little bit. Don't keep taking games away from them. They've already lost some players, right? Last season was spread out in a weird way. We are going to have an Olympic break for sure next year. So an all-star break just feels like a little bit too much. Just kind of show your fans of your original 6 franchises, we feel you. You're a little hurt right now. You're a little annoyed right now. We're not going to keep taking home games away from you. And we're going to let you, as you kind of suggested off the top of this topic, no more expansion for a while. It's safe to go buy a Gwen Phillips jersey right now. Don't follow Matt. Don't get the Danielle Serdachny jersey. But right now, it's safe. Go ahead. There needs to be, you don't have to be that vocal or outwardly stating it, but you got to let fans kind of fall in love with their players and their team. And,
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like you can't afford, at the end of this season to have expansion again. Like, right. Then you're going to blow up your markets again.
Yeah.
So to me, I really hope now you're going to go the 3 years. You need to allow Vancouver and Seattle as well to establish those markets and see where your product is at. Because you want to remain competitive and, you want to give development time, right? Like, if anything, I would say instead of expansion, look at what a minor league feeder system is going to start looking at. And I know they look at the NCAA as that, but maybe you need to have something similar to the AHL in a way.
Well,
right?
this is it. Like if you've graduated college and you're not quite making the lineup, what do you do?
What do you do in the meantime?
Yeah.
Right? Because you're only going to kind of still train at that level for so long before you decide, okay, well, it's not happening for me. I got to get a real job.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that's, to me, is the discussions that you need to look at is there a bit of a feeder league that can come into play. And so that then when you do potentially run into injuries, you have that ability to, call someone up. And then you're expanding the game, but people understand that at that lower level, it might not be quite as good as the PWHL itself.
And that's been adopted worldwide. We all know what the AHL is. We all know what, AAA baseball is or whatever else. So it can work. But they're clearly still finding their footing here a little bit and trying to figure out how this is all going to work together. So patience is required.
Absolutely.
But I am a fan who's, but my team was gutted this offseason, so I'm mad. And so I'm less likely at the moment to give them the benefit of the doubt required. But on an intellectual level, I try to keep things,
Yes.
before I get all super irrational when the season starts again.
Yeah, you got to try to keep that hat on.
I'll try to. I try to. Lisa Wallace from CP, thank you so much for coming in and doing this. I had no idea until you walked in the door today that this was part of your summer holiday.
Oh, it's all good. Glad to make this part of the break.
We had Ian Mendez on the show a week ago, and during that recording, we mentioned what was coming up, and he said, "Oh, good, you got the reputable Wallace. You got the good Wallace." So glad he gave us the endorsement there. That you're right to go ahead. So thank you for doing this. I appreciate it, and I hope you'll come back.
Yeah, it's been lots of fun. I'll definitely look forward to it.
We'll wrap this one up here. Stay tuned as we continue to move forward through the TCA summer sessions. You're going to hear from Joshua O'Connor, formerly of OSEG. He's got himself a new project we're looking forward to talking to him about. Dean Brown will make his annual return to the show. He gets a little bored midsummer, and we can kind of bug him at that point. So
he is recovering from hernia surgery.
I know. I texted him to ask about a date, and he's like, "Well, not this week." So he's going through some things, but he has still committed to coming back on. It's going to be a lot of fun. So stick around for all of that. Make sure you're subscribed right now wherever you're hearing us on your favorite podcast app, and give us a follow on social media. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
We'll wrap it up here. For Lisa Wallace, my name's Matt Robinson. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
It's TCA Summer Sessions. It's TCA